You know what? Writing a resume is hard. It's really hard for a lot of people. It's uncomfortable. It's an awkward writing style, and for most of us, it's really confusing. How do you put something together so that you get noticed for exactly the jobs that you want the most? How many pages should there be? Do you need multiple resumes? What if you didn't graduate, or maybe took a few years off, or worked in a completely different field than the one you want to get into now? These things are insanely difficult even for the most collected people. One of my friends is a professional writer, meaning someone who makes a living from his writing abilities, and even he confessed to me that he can't figure out how the hell to make a great resume. Simply put, writing a resume is a dreaded task for almost all of us. But here's the good news. We're going to make the process a lot more understandable and quite manageable. Let's make it clear right away. Most of the resumes are pretty weak. Some of them are really bad. And if you feel your resume might be one of them, don't beat yourself up about it. Resumes are usually bad not because you don't have talent or aren't a really great person. It's bad and large because putting together a killer resume is difficult for almost everyone. Many people feel uncomfortable when it comes to writing about themselves in a way that really showcases their talents and strengths to a hiring manager or recruiter. In many cultures, bragging is considered inappropriate. We're encouraged to be humble and prove our skills with actions, not words. Let me be blunt. There is no room for modesty in putting together a terrific resume. You have to shout at the top of your voice that you are a go-getter, that you are a godsend, and that you are exactly what the employer needs. Let's consider several basic principles for putting together a terrific resume. Principle number 1. A resume is a marketing document, not your autobiography. When you sit down to write a new resume, promise me that you're not going to list everything you've done since your first job in school, where you delivered cookies or picked berries. You have to approach this project with the idea that you're putting together a marketing document and that your goal is to get the attention of a certain audience so that they invite you for an interview. This is an important distinction. Most resumes I've seen fall more into the category of listing all the things I've done, rather than the compelling marketing document category. They're more like, I did this, I supervised this, I'm responsible for this, I managed this. Super boring. Spelling out what you do or have done in each job is certainly important, but if you can't convey to the audience why it's important, interesting, or impressive for them, then you're missing out an important opportunity to sell yourself. I don't think anyone will know that I led a team of 10 people in a corporate takeover means that you were the glue that single-handedly had a group of incredibly stressed people together and got them through in a crazy, complicated, hostile takeover. See the difference? So you need to think like a marketer throughout the entire resume process. What will excite your audience and how can you present your key assets in a way that encourages them to make a buying decision, which in this case is the decision to hire you. Another important principle. Your resume should be strategic, but not blatantly inaccurate. Almost no one goes through their entire career and then at the end of it says, "Oh, look at that. That was a perfect career. I'm so glad I didn't take one wrong step and get a job I hated." People with flawless career paths are almost non-existent. Most of us have victories and failures in our professional lives. Jobs we wish we hadn't taken, gaps we're not sure how to handle, maybe a degree we didn't finish. It's not just your problem. It affects a lot of us. Many of us have small and big problems that we need to consider and strategize when putting together a new resume. What do I mean by strategy? It means putting emphasis on strengths when embellishing them somewhere and making weaknesses invisible. I'm not urging you to blatantly lie on your resume, although that sometimes works too. I encourage you to emphasize the things that enhance your image. For example, if you have an unfinished degree, it's not necessary to include the word unfinished. You could just include the year you started and finished. Or about work experience. Suppose you worked in logistics in your country. You don't need to write, "I have no work experience in the US, but I drove trucks from Portugal to Kazakhstan for 2 years and then took a course." It's better to write, for example, I worked in transport logistics for more than 2 years. I have successful experience of organizing international transportation. I took an intensive 2 months training of dispatching in the US. I have an in-depth understanding of market analysis and negotiating techniques with brokers. Sounds a lot more interesting. That's the whole point. We omit our weaknesses and pay special attention to the strengths. Now let's move on to the structure of a good resume and briefly consider each of the main sections. Section 1, header. The header is your name and contact information. For job search purposes, be sure to create a professional email with your full name. For example, for myself, I would create dmitry.demishev@gmail or yahoo.com. It's not important which email provider you use, but it should be international, not some local provider with a domain of your country. Photo is also optional. In the US it's not mandatory. You can also add the desired position. For example, if the job is called remote truck dispatcher, you can write exactly that. Section 2, short description. This is where we essentially describe ourselves in a couple of sentences. I don't always see this section in resumes, but it's very important. For one thing, it may be the only thing a recruiter will look at. Most recruiters look through mountains of resumes very quickly and want to determine whether or not you are a yes or a no in just a few seconds. If you don't pick their interest from the first words, don't expect them to look at your entire resume. This section is also very important because it sets the tone for the entire document. This is your first opportunity to state your professional brand and give the person reviewing your resume a snapshot of who you are and what you specialize in. To write this section correctly, you may need to change it depending on what the employer is interested in. For example, if the job posting says the company is looking for a stress-resistant dispatcher, include this trait in the description. If they're looking for a good communicator or strong negotiator, just write, I have the ability to negotiate. Here are some examples of dispatcher descriptions to help set your mind on the right track. First one. Professional truck dispatcher with experience in sales and customer relations management. Skillful communicator and negotiator. Able to build strong personal relationships with brokers and create a great company image. Fantastic example. This person indicated that he is a dispatcher but also has experience in sales and customer relations. Based on that, he very logically revealed his strengths, communication and negotiation. And then he explained what he could bring to the company, building relationships with brokers and creating a good image of the firm. Here's another one. Young dispatcher eager for success, highly motivated to prove my value for a trucking company that is ready to take on a dispatcher without experience. Fast learner and an A+ student, highly stress resistant and ready to work in a fast-paced environment. That first sentence is awesome. A young dispatcher who's hungry for success. By submitting such a resume for the right job, he will definitely catch the employer's attention. Next sentence. Highly motivated to prove his worth to a transportation company that's willing to accept a dispatcher with no experience. Honestly, I wouldn't emphasize that fact that he has no experience at all, but that's his right. Next. I'm a fast learner and an excellent student. Have a high stress tolerance and a willingness to work at a fast pace. Basically, the guy has no experience. He probably just graduated from university or college and is looking for his first job. That said, he's not hiding it, but emphasizing his strengths. He's saying, look at me, I'm young, I'm full of energy and motivation, I'll learn everything quickly and you can just dump a lot of work on me and I'll sit up late into the night and do it until I gain experience. Again, for the right company that already has experienced dispatchers but lacks working hands, this description will work just fine. Okay, section 3. Key skills. The main thing worth mentioning is that the skills listed should match the skills the employer is looking for. Read the job posting carefully and look for keywords. Of course, if it says that load board skills are required, be sure to mention that in this section. Think about the skills you have gained over your life, over time working in other companies and other industries. I'm sure you have something to brag about, but it has to be relevant to the profession of a dispatcher. Plus, you can already write out at least a dozen skills from just one course you've taken. Skills can be divided into soft skills and hard skills. Hard skills are professional knowledge associated with the technical side of the profession, and soft skills are the personal features of a person, his character traits, and the behavior in general. Here are some examples. Hard skills: ability to work with load boards, invoicing, understanding of hours of service, knowledge of market analysis and techniques. And for soft skills: time management, attention to detail, problem solving, stress resistance, or teamwork. Alright, section 4. Work experience. The work experience listed must be relevant to the position and match the key skills presented. If you worked in logistics in another country or in another position, great, include that. If you have worked in another profession, doctor, engineer, sales manager, also great, also include that. That work experience has made you the person you are now, responsible, attentive to detail, good communicator, and so on, depending on the skills you indicated. If you also worked as a waiter or a taxi driver and can explain how that made you a better person or what you accomplished, that's fine too. But if that job didn't teach you anything and you didn't achieve anything outstanding there, it's best to skip it. Section 5. Education. In this section, under each individual item, add a brief description. What you learned, what you achieved. Just putting the name of the school or university is not good enough, unless you graduated from an Ivy League university or like London School of Economics. It's better to skip your school education. It looks very funny when people write in a resume, from 3rd to 5th grade I studied at school number 28, and from 5th to 9th grade at school number 54. No one is interested in this information. And unfortunately, nobody is interested in your higher education either, unless you show your achievements or explain why it's relevant. Just think about it. Maybe you participated in international competitions, received awards, or participated in interesting social projects. Or at least describe how this education has affected your personal qualities. A good description of a mediocre education will be much more valuable than a doctorate degree without any explanation. And of course, don't forget about alternative education. Conferences, seminars, online courses, especially those related to logistics, you know what I mean. I recently got a call from a guy who asked me, "Can I put your course on my resume?" Well, of course you can. That's going to be the most important and relevant thing on your dispatch resume. So, what are the main points we learned? A resume is not an autobiography, but a document created for the purpose of advertising, selling yourself as a potential member of the team that you're trying to get into. Every sentence, every phrase in your resume should be strategically thought out so that it highlights your strengths and hides your weaknesses. Your resume should include the key skills that the employer is looking for in a new employee and that he specified in the vacancy. All references to education and work experience should emphasize your competence and point to your past achievements. And before we finish, I want to say a few words about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a social network for finding jobs and making business contacts. I'm not going to get into detail and do a demonstration on how to create an account, because signing up for LinkedIn is the same as signing up for Facebook or any other social network. The only difference is that on Facebook you mostly find former classmates and communicate with your friends, whereas on LinkedIn you find jobs, clients, partners, and communicate with your colleagues. Your LinkedIn page is the same as your resume. There too, you list your key skills, work experience, education, and you even make a brief description on top of the page, just like in your resume. On LinkedIn, when you apply for a job or contact a manager of a company you want to get into, they will certainly check your page. In addition to describing yourself, you can subscribe to companies you're interested in, famous people in your industry, and post and repost articles about your topics that you're interested in. In the previous lesson, I talked about how you have to make your Facebook page professional for community and networking. With LinkedIn, you have to do the same thing.